So welcome to the Knowledge Exchange webinar that we've put together with our friends at UKRI, where we're going to hear a little bit more about the proof of concept fund that has been announced and will be launched soon. I should also thank colleagues at ARMA for cross-promoting this webinar, as I know that this will be of interest to people in research services offices and tech transfer offices at many universities. So thank you for joining us. Under the new brand, Knowledge Exchange UK, I should say that the way this is going to work, we're going to hand over to the UKRI team in the room, who are going to present some slides, talk a little bit about the sort of how the process will work, but also we'll have time for Q&A. So do think about what questions you want to ask, pose them in the chat, and then that will be moderated as usual. But without further ado, I'm going to hand over to the UKRI team, who are going to kind of lead the session and give you a bit more of an understanding of this exciting opportunity. I guess just before I do, I should say, I think, the need for proof of concept funding to support the development technologies is quite clear. And this is one step along that journey of trying to get more funds into that space. So I look forward to hearing about the plans and this being the start of a journey of trying to help more technology to progress to make an impact in the world. Over to the UKRI team.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Rita, for all the work, and thanks to Knowledge Exchange UK for setting this up. So my name is Tony Sotirio. I'm Director of Commercialisation for UKRI. Maybe worth just introducing the team that we've got here.
I'm Nishta. I'm the Senior Manager for Commercialisation Team.
Hi there, I'm Heather McLean and I'm Head of Research Commercialisation at UKRI.
Good morning, and I'm Alex Shex. I'm Deputy Director of Commercialization Research in UKRI.
So as Stuart said, we're just going to present a few slides around the background and the aims. Looking forward to questions. Questions are the best bit of these things, so please do put in your questions in the chat, and we'll try and get to as many as we can. Any we don't get to today, we will try and follow up afterwards. So if we don't manage to answer them live, we will try to get to them afterwards. So we're just sharing the slide set, but it's worth just saying that I'm really excited about the opportunity that we have to, as Stuart said, increase and contribute to the proof of concept and commercialisation agenda in the UK. We know that there's significant demand and opportunity out there. And it's great to see that supported by the government and Treasury and DSIT, of course, our parent department. So really great. The proof of concept is open, as we said. And on the slide set, I won't read out all the aims and objectives. It's all, of course, on the website. But I think it's worth just saying a couple of things, really. So what we want to do is, this is aimed at sort of pre-incorporation stage. It's not to fund basic discovery or fundamental research. It is very much around that proof of concept space. And we are looking at and inviting applications from any discipline and across disciplines. So either within disciplines or transdisciplinary, the term, interdisciplinary. And by the looks of it, the interest we're getting absolutely reflects that. So we've also been quite open about what can be funded, and we'll come on to that in a second. It's worth just saying, I think it's worth saying, there are other schemes that within UKRI that do fund proof of concept. Okay, and there's at least one open at the moment. That's Medical Research Council's what's called DPFS. So it is worth just looking around to see what scheme is most applicable to the opportunity. So thank you. Next slide. So this is a summary of what the overall funding and the programme is. This worth saying, this is an initial round, and it's part of the bigger 40 million over 5 years that the Chancellor announced as part of the budget, the recent budget. So this particular round is for a total size fund of 9 million. And we are looking for grants between 100 and 250,000 maximum, costed at 80% full economic costing, and between, well, sort of up to 12 months duration, but we're sort of estimating 6 to 12 months, but it can be anything up to 12 months. Thank you, Alex. And then in terms of who can apply, so we are sort of open to any organisation that has eligibility to apply for UKRI funding, with a couple of exceptions. So businesses aren't able to apply to this particular opportunity. And the only other exception to that is organisations that are government departments or arm's length bodies that can apply to GOTT, Government Office for Technology Transfer funding. And I can talk about reasons for that, but that's the only exclusion. Other than that, universities, but also other research institutes and also research organisations that are eligible for UKRI funding are able to apply for this. In terms of leads, we would accept and like to have either leads or co-leads. And again, once again, we're quite open to who that might be, and it's the most appropriate person. So of course, the main criteria here is they must have a contract with the host organisation. And apart from that, it could be a technician, it could be a researcher, for example, it could be a postdoc. So we're pretty open to who could be the actual lead or co-lead.
So we'll move on to kind of how to apply. So one of the things that we did initially is because actually it is one of the first time that UKRI is announcing a proof of concept call across all the different council remits. And while we know that there was a great appetite for this type of support, as identified by the independent spin-out review, for example, but also our own evidence, we really wanted to better understand how the level of demand for those type of funding opportunity. So what we did is pre-announce the proof of concept funding opportunity on our website. And so that is the link that you have here to UKRI, the funding funder. And the interesting about pre-announcement is that actually gives you sight of exactly how the funding opportunity is going to work, and notably all the questions that you're going to have to answer as part of your application that Ever going to later detail to you, and also some of the scope and eligibility criteria. So that is open, and you can actually and I will encourage everybody who's unsure to actually look at that into the detail and see how their idea fits that funding opportunity. We also then wanted to better understand, in order to manage a meaningful success rate for applicants, but also to tailor the peer review process that we're going to use, we therefore opened what we call an intention to submit survey. And that is a mandatory stage, so that you can only apply to the proof of concept opportunity once it's going to go live in March, if you completed that survey. We'll go in a minute, I'll show you in a minute what the survey looks like, but its deadline for completing that survey is 3rd of March. And then you will, once completed that survey, we'll look beyond in the background what the demands looks like. We might apply some demand management measure, and we can talk about that in a minute. And then applicant will be invited, or eligible applicant will be invited to apply. So let's look at the current deadlines and what we anticipate to happen. So the pre-announcement went live alongside the intention to submit on the 20th of January. The intention to submit is closing on the 3rd of March. The then proof of concept funding opportunity itself is opening on TFS, the funding service, which is the new UKRI platform, to apply for funding on the 12th of March. And you will have until the 29th of May to put your application in, providing you invited to apply. We'll then do panel review around May, July, and we anticipate grant decisions over the summer with, and that is a specific of this call. with grants needing to start no later than September 2025. And the reason for that is some internal funding cycle. So let's talk about the intention to submit. So as I said, this is a mandatory stage, and it is really, so there's no right and wrong answer in that intention to submit, to be fair. It's a very simple one-page form. And I mean, it is the purpose of it. It's really to help us understand the demand for that proof of concept funding. But also, and that's mainly to ensure that if needed, we can put demand management measure in place to enable a meaningful success rate. But also, we want to better understand through that survey the different breadth of disciplines and support that is required for that concept, and that is to enable us to better tailor the peer review process from the onset. So what the survey does ask is the name of the project lead, email address, the email address by which you, if you already access the TFS system, log onto that system. The reason why we are asking that, and that might be actually a duplicate, but actually it isn't, is to ensure that people, I mean, we want to understand how many people already access the system and will be able to be invited by the system, as opposed to the people which are not yet registered on the system, and therefore giving enough time for our colleagues in delivery service to actually enable that to happen. So to give you a bit of rewarding. And then obviously explain to us why you actually haven't got that, because that would be useful. And then also just a project title and a contact detail in your research office or tech transfer or KE office, or whatever office actually responsible for managing those applications. And the reason for that is once that intention to submit close, we will go back to applicants as well as their institution, should there be a need to. So then moving on to the funding application stage. John, Emma?
Sure. The funding application stage will be on TFS. At the moment, this is a screenshot of the pre-announcement for the proof of concept, but it will look almost exactly the same. And that opens on the 12th of March. Do you go to the next slide, please?
Yes, sorry. So securing your support for your organization. So that's going to be important for that proof of concept. When we initially engage with the community, university researchers, but also the tech transfer and KE office, that was something that was very clear from our engagement, that it was important to make sure that there was bought-in from the institution to actually take those projects forward. So this is something that we are asking as part of the application stage, to make sure that applicant engage with their tech transfer, KE office and research office, and able to get support for that the application. That support will be actually looked at, and the degree of support will be actually looked at by the peer review committees, and so therefore is part of the assessment.
Thanks, Alex. So when it comes to actually applying, making a full application, these are the application questions and the assessment areas. They're already outlined in the pre-announcement, actually, but I thought it was just worth mentioning them right now. So many of them are quite specific to this particular type of research commercialization proof of concept scheme, and others you'll probably recognize, which are relevant to nearly every scheme that we operate, such as applicant team and capability to deliver. Next slide, please, Alex. The questions that are relevant to the research commercialization proof of concept scheme, these questions have been drafted with input from across the research commercialization community in response to the 2021 government's innovation strategy. And they're really to help us maximise the potential benefits from research to reach the economy and society. And they include the opportunity and market analysis. So what is this opportunity you're looking to exploit? What challenges will your project address? It also includes a question on route to market. So how would your proposed project progress the innovation towards an intended user or market? And also your intellectual property, the management of that, and how you will communicate the outputs of your project whilst maintaining that integrity of the IP. Thanks, Alex. I think that is the sort of the end of our presentation, and we're happy to take questions.
Brilliant. Thank you. Should we stop sharing? Yep. Just stop sharing. So thank you. There's lots of questions that have come in, and we've obviously had lots of questions already. Also to Initiative, who's been monitoring the questions.
Yep.
That's okay.
Should we start with a question about demand management? What can you tell about the demand management and processes around that?
Should I pick that up or jump in? I'll pick that up. So, okay, so obviously this is probably the number one question that we've got so far, understandably. So I'll try and capture some of the questions that have come through around this. So the idea is that we obviously are not necessarily expecting search organisations to demand manage before the intention to submit close deadline of 3rd of March. Now, we know some might want to do that, and that's up to research organisations to decide whether they want to do that, but we are not expecting research organisations necessarily to do demand management up to them. Once we get to the 3rd of March, we will look to see how many intention to submit applications that we've got. And as and picking up one of the questions, what we want to do is reduce unnecessary work and bureaucracy across research organisations. So we want to aim for around the region of around a 20% eventual success rate. Obviously, plus or minus, we can't guarantee that as a success rate, but that's the aim. And the aim for that is we don't want thousands of people to be putting in a lot of work with a very little chance of funding. However, so what we will do is we will look at the applications, the intent to submit applications that come in and the range of organisations that come in. And if we need to, we will, at that stage, determine a maximum limit per type of research organisation based on Ref 21 active researcher returns. So we are not saying what that limit is going to be at the moment, because it will depend on how, the range and I guess the broadness of the range of different research organisations that put the intention to submit. Okay, it won't be UKRI that does the screening or selection at this stage. So what we will do at that stage is there's to be two groups, basically. So we will determine, and we will then publish, of course, at that stage. We will say, if you are in an organisation with the most research active participants, you're allowed to submit X amount of full applications. If you're in an organisation that didn't return any, you're allowed to submit Y applications. Okay, and obviously that will be less than the first one. But we won't actually be doing any selection. But what we will do is we will then come back to the individual leads from the intention to submit stage, together with the relevant R&D office and or technology transfer office, and either say you're within the limit for your type of organisation, therefore you're invited to submit, or we will say the number of applications from your particular research organisation has exceeded the limit that we put in for demand management, which is Y. Can you go away as a research organisation and work between the R&D office, the research office, the TTO, and the applicant, potential applicants, to agree which applications should be submitted at the full stage? So we won't be doing that screening, and there's lots of questions about how could we do that. We're not intending to do that screening. We are putting that onus onto the research organisation ultimately to decide which applications to come through, and then you need to come back to tell us within a window, and then only those applications that have been prioritised by the research organisation will go on to be invited to submit the full applications. I think that hopefully answers most of the questions on demand management. Is that, Nishita?
Yeah.
That pick up most of the elements?
Yes. Talking about the lead eligibility, there are multiple questions of who is eligible from even the eligible organization. Like, can people with honorary contracts lead? And yeah, do you want to say anything about that?
So as I said, they must have a contract. We might just need to double check that, but my understanding is an honorary contract would count, but we just need to double check that, is what I think.
Yeah, I think as long as the contract wouldn't end within the lifetime of the grant, although I think there's some sort of sometimes there's an internal, like they would extend it if they have a grant that actually does beyond.
Yeah, but it's actually worth highlighting in terms of person eligibility that as UKRI, we're moving away from the classic primary investigator type lead. And so therefore, for this opportunity, we're looking for who's best is suitable to lead a proof of concept project from across an eligible organization. And that can not necessarily be the most senior academic, but that could actually be somebody in the tech transfer office, providing that they are eligible to do that from their organization, as well as a postdoc, PDRA, or a technician. So I think it's about, the question is about who is best to lead that project and make it a success. I would say.
Thank you. Next question.
Questions about industrial partners, spin-outs and collaborations. Can industrial partners co-lead / collaborate / be project partners?
Right. So I think there's different aspects. In order to co-lead, you need to be eligible. And so therefore, we do not expect, because the proof of concept is not open for a business or a company to lead, therefore you cannot co-lead either. You can, however, be a project partner as part of a proof of concept project. Actually, when you consider commercialization, we welcome project partner as part of those grants, but you need to be mindful of, and that's part of the question as part of the assessment process, is how that IP can be managed going forward, and so on and so forth.
Does that fully answer the question?
Yeah. Can they also participate in different activities? Can they be subcontractors?
Yeah. So as part of UKRI normal term and condition of grants, you can have subcontractor, which might be contracted to do a specific piece of work. But I would encourage people to look at the rules again, with subcontracting, because if you subcontract, therefore you have a contract to actually deliver a piece of work, you're not entitled to any of the IP rising from that project because of the subcontracting rule. So just bear that in mind and look at it. But yes, subcontracting is allowed.
Are there specific rules around how much of percentage of the grant can be subcontracted or subcontracting based in UK, outside UK?
So ultimately, we will be looking to the panel to judge value for money.
Yeah.
And I think it will be up to the full applications to justify any arrangements for either partnering and subcontracting particularly. That will be looked at as a whole by the panel and come up with a recommendation about value for money. My understanding is overseas subcontracting isn't ineligible, but obviously the panel will want to be looking at that. And then of course, we also need to think about things like trusted research and innovation aspects, but that we will be looking to the panel, but within the normal UKRI rules, we'll be applying here for subcontracting and appropriate partnering with external organisations.
Yeah. So just justify it really well.
Yes.
I guess is
Yeah.
the advice really.
Absolutely. And how particularly, how will it support that commercialisation journey?
Yeah.
You know, how will that partnering?
Questions around the type of projects. So there are questions that will there be an allocation for SHAPE opportunities to get fair access, or if a project which is a DPFS project is eligible for POC funding.
So if there's already a sort of a scheme that's which we're eligible for, we are saying that you should be applying to that scheme. rather than this proof of concept scheme at this time. So we're not really accepting, well, we're not accepting applications that, you know, have been put into DPFS, for example, already.
So it's worth just highlighting that. I think just highlighting that, I think that if an application is put into, for example, you know, MRC's Developmental Pathway Funding Scheme and put in for us for the same application, it won't be considered by us probably, but we don't know what stage it will be screened out. So it may be after the full application stage, in which case it will count towards the cap. So I think just as research organisations, I think that's just really important. And the reason for that, being honest here, is that actually, you know, the proof of concept is still a relatively small amount of funding, okay, and the limits is a lot less than you can apply for DPFS. And so the aim of proof of concept is to try and fill a gap rather than replicate or duplicate other funding schemes. There was also a question about impact acceleration accounts and stage. And I pick that
IQ,
up
IQ ownership, yeah.
So I pick that up. So just being clear, so to be honest, we don't mind what stage, okay, so we're not saying, you know, it must be post impact acceleration account stage, because that's quite very difficult. Not every organization, of course, has impact acceleration accounts in every discipline, I think. So we're not saying, you know, it must be post that. The big difference, I think, ultimately is size of funding, I think. So the way we're, and it's oversimplifying it, but we know at individual organizational level, if you have an impact acceleration account, you know, the amount of grants, money per grant can be relatively on the smaller scale, less than 100,000. I know that's overgeneralization. So that's why we're pitching this at 100 to 250. So it doesn't have to be the next stage in the commercialization, but it might be a different scale of project and impact acceleration account. Obviously, in terms of ICUR, this is sort of complementary to ICUR. And I think we obviously understand that there is, I wouldn't say an overlap, but there is some similarities between some of the things that ICUR might fund. Again, I think this is meant to be a complementary scheme and an opportunity for funding. So that's what I would just say about the ICUR.
There also was initially a question with regards to support for shape commercialization versus STEM. And I think that's a recurring question also in the FAQs. So in that, I think we are not exclusive of that commercialization journey. And I think everything that has a commercialization purpose and aim is welcome to apply. And that includes across all different disciplines. So an UKRI will look to fund a range of projects, both in terms of scope, in terms of cost, and in terms of duration. So, and that will go and be decided by our committee. So it's not, SHAPE is absolutely not excluded as part of that, and welcome to apply, obviously, should that be the most appropriate commercialization route, and it's for you to make that case in your application.
Yeah, we really want a well-rounded portfolio here.
Can I just pick up the late question that's come in, and thank you for the feedback. And I'd really welcome the person who's there to reach out sort of offline. So the question that's come in is, appreciate that the rush to get money out, but the call has been really badly designed and taken off system shows no lessons have been learned. So I think if you could perhaps follow up, I'd really welcome a discussion really, and obviously the idea is to learn lessons for future calls. So yeah, so I think the reason we've gone offline, there's a number of reasons. Partly because we understand that not everyone who might be eligible is already logged on to or a member of, I can't remember that, sorry, that's not the right terminology, but is signed on to TFS yet, because TFS is a relatively new system. And what we wanted to do is cast the net wide at this stage. But I realise that that is causing some issues for some research organisations, which we completely accept. But I think that's the reason, and there's pros and cons to that. So I guess the question is, you know, if you whoever that, if you could reach out, we really welcome that. You say that HIs cannot meet EDI requirements in the timescale you were given. We're not going to ask for EDI information at the full in terms of how the research organisation has balanced and prioritised and the EDI information related to that. Obviously, we'll be looking at EDI information as part of the full applications that come in, of course, but we're not going to be asking the university to justify their prioritisation if they need to make one on the basis of EDI. So I think it's worth saying that we're not planning to do that.
It's not fellowship, so
Yes.
to some extent, it's not. Obviously, it would be good to do that, and potentially we'll think about doing that in the future, but not for this potential of this round.
I think one of the questions come around what kind of projects, technology, readiness level you're looking for. So could you just shed some more light on that?
Can do that.
So again, we are specifically not saying we want and focusing on a particular technology readiness level, not least because we know that that sort of terminology isn't appropriate to every discipline or every project. However, I think the fundamental thing is no basic discovery research. Okay, so that's really fundamental. Apart from that, we are open to what stage of commercialization this is, up to the point of the commercialization. So, up to the point of either spin-out formation, up to the point of licensing. But we are not specifically saying, we've been told by a lot of time across many disciplines, if we start talking about technology readiness levels, that turns people off and is not appropriate, particularly to shape subjects, but more broadly. So that's why we are being open to that. And again, the application will need to justify, I guess, what they want to do and how that's appropriate to the stage of the project and the commercialization journey.
Just adding to that, for commercializers, social ventures also include not-for-profit.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, simple answer.
And can you expand on the level of support that institutions are expected to provide?
So as part of the application stage, you'll have a box to fill on the online TFS application. And that is to highlight how your project is being supported by your research institution. And so we expect somebody in a position in the tech transfer, KE office, or other function to detail that the project is known, how you might have been working with, or the institution might have been working with the applicant to develop that project further, and what support will be ongoing through the project itself. And that really varied. So I think the feedback is very much around, it needs to be tailored and you need to be specific. So it cannot be a generic wording, because I'm pretty sure the panel will pick up on that. So it's about what is the support that the institution providing to that project in order to make it a success. Basically what the panel will be looking at. I hope that helps answer the question. It's a bit generic, but.
And can I come back to a question about sort of almost stage and R&D activities versus commercialization, which is just picking up on, can I pick up on that question, if I may? So it's a really good question. I think ideally we want a blend of the development of the technology or product or service, whatever's being commercialized. But at the same time, I think where this scheme is slightly different compared to some other schemes is we would want appropriate focus on development of the commercial case, the commercial readiness. Okay, and in the blurb for the call, we give some examples. We're not saying they're the only type, but we give a range of examples of what we mean by commercial as well as technical development of a particular new innovation product or service and whatever. So again, as long as it's not basic discovery research, R&D activities are absolutely permitted, but they need to be focused at the right stage. But I think it's probably worth saying, without the focus on the commercial development, that application will probably not be prioritized by the panel.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously there are very specific questions around how you're commercializing your sort of idea. So there's the opportunity in market analysis, route to market, and intellectual property. And without really answering those questions fully, it would be difficult, I think, for the panel to sort of recommend it would be funded.
I think adding on to what panel is looking for, do we have any information about how committee membership will look like and how research councils are included in the review process?
So obviously, as UKRI, we're one single organization, and behind this team, we are working with all the research council, including in working with we'll be working with their different committees and panel. It's interesting is that the proof of concept funding actually was a recommendation out of a spin-out review. And if you look at that recommendation, there is another one that highlights the fact that UKRI, notably an UKRI committee, should include more investors, entrepreneurs, and so on as part of the decision-making process. So this is something that we'll be looking to take forward as part of the recruitment of the panel as well, but also working with the existing panel from the Research Council. And obviously, the benefit of the funding service is that the assessment, the question you will be asked, and the assessment on which is based is actually already published. So if you want to know how you're going to be judged, this is actually part of the pre-announcement, and you can actually look at that straight away.
I think there is a question around outputs from a previous funded project. Is that eligible? Because we are talking about if you're eligible for different scheme. So can you just clarify a bit more on that? So
as Sonny already highlighted, this is not to fund de novo research or discovery research, but actually, obviously, we expect those projects to take forward output of research which have been funded through either UKRI program schemes, but also through others as well. So, and actually, I think it's a really important point in that we don't see a link between the body of research that previously been funded and this program. So for example, we are aware that different program and funding scheme in UKRI need to be linked to previously funded research by a specific council in UKRI. This is not the case for that proof of concept. So as long as it's not funding de novo research, everything goes.
I think it's a quite generic question, but what is the ultimate intention of the scheme? And what does an ideal project and set of outcomes look like?
So that's a very broad question. I mean, so the outcome ultimately, and I think we do need to bear in mind one of the routes where this funding comes from, which is around university spin out. That said, we've tried to be broad and say it's not only about university spin outs. So what we would like to see is evidence, and this won't happen during the course of the project, we appreciate this probably, but evidence of increased rates of commercialization and successful commercialization. Now that will take different forms for different projects. We talked about social ventures earlier, so so we are not saying it must be X, Y, or Z, but what we want to see ideally, and this may take a little bit of time after the end of the project, to be able to track that the proof of concept funding has helped secure that commercialization journey, whatever it might be. If it is a spin out, ideally what would be great to see in due course is investment and longevity of spin out, but that's going to be way beyond the project. And so ultimately that's what it's about. It's about increasing that route to commercialization and de-risking the commercialization journey, whichever is the appropriate range. But it's quite a difficult, a good question, but a difficult question for us to say because we are not particularly focused on one type of commercialization.
I guess, I mean, if you really think about it, ultimately it's to try and kind of maximize and accelerate those benefits from research and actually getting them out into the world, kind of benefiting the economy and people. So that's ultimately the aim here, I suppose.
It's talking about individual applications, like are early career researchers encouraged to apply for this call, or is it reserved for more mid to late?
So they're absolutely eligible if they have a contract with the research organisation. I mean, I don't think we're encouraging one particular type over another. I think all are encouraged to apply if they're eligible, is what I would say. So early career researchers are eligible to apply if they have that contract with the research organisation, which both ECRs probably would do.
I think we have a few more questions about demand management and how can universities manage, how will the university be able to manage the demand given the deadlines and timelines?
So yes, appreciate this will be a challenge. And obviously in some institutions more than others, if there's a high demand in that institution. And we realise that timeline to do that may be a bit squeezed. So I think all we can do is apologise for that and accept that. But I think, you know, unfortunately, we do have the timelines that we do. So I think we just have to acknowledge that it may not be a perfect process. But I think that it is just set, you know, because we unfortunately do need to get the funding out the door for 25-26, or some funding out the door for 25-26.
I'm open to learning from this process.
Yes, yes. But I do note that the questions and the proposed timescale in that I don't think we can necessarily stick to 4 to 6 weeks, for example. That's one of the questions said for that. But yeah, we do realise that that is going to be a bit of an imposition on the research organisation to make that prioritisation.
I think it's more of a clarification that, like we said, we don't accept duplicate applications to say DPFS and POC. But does that mean that medical related projects will be put at a disadvantage even if they're not submitted to DPFS just because they're in the scope?
No, not at all. So what we're saying is we don't want people to submit to both for obvious reasons, but we are open to the disciplines. We may put in, depending on the end, we may just think about, you know, we're really keen to encourage a broad range of disciplines. But we would hope certainly not want to be disadvantaged in a particular discipline, but we would at the same time would like to encourage a broad range of disciplines that come into us, is what I would say.
I think there's slightly different criteria, actually, eligibility criteria in terms of the actual project themselves and the amount of funding and the duration. So, I mean, if you are eligible for DPFS, you should apply to that. But if you're not, then this proof of concept scheme is for you.
And also, I mean, the range of funding eligible for DPFS versus proof of concept is very different. And so I think you should apply where you're most likely to help your project. But we would not accept typical application, no resubmission. Actually, making that very clear. So if your project's been turned down by a previous research council funding program, for example, or funding opportunity, you cannot reapply to proof of concept. So that's because that will count as a resubmission. And we don't accept duplication of application. So if you're already submitted something to one of a research council funding opportunity and you're going through the selection process, then you cannot apply to proof of concept because that will count as a duplicate application.
Just to clarify, you can't apply for the same project. No. You as an applicant are still eligible there. No, that's all right, just making sure.
I think there's a few questions on spin out. How can they involve their spin out into the project? And yeah, do you want to comment about investment spin outs?
So the proof of concept is targeted at kind of a pre-commercialization, if you like, and it's absolutely fine, as we discussed, to have a project partner as part of a proof of concept. And in some instance, that might be one of the spin-out company. What we will expect those projects to do and demonstrate is how the IP going forward will be managed, making sure that the research organization adhere to subsidy control, for example, and those activities. But it's absolutely fine to have a spin-out as part of a project partner.
Can I just pick up a question that I think I'm at? So just a question directly in response to what I said around the sort of outcomes. So as I said, I think just to emphasize, yes, I talked about spin-outs, but I did also talk about licensing and social ventures and things. So as I said, we are really open to the route that is proposed for the commercialisation. And we are not saying it is only spin out. So just being clear about that. We are very open to the route, and so sort of something that supports and accelerates licensing, for example, would absolutely be valid in terms of scope.
I think it's because you specified the spend about the spend. There are a question about spend deadlines.
Yeah.
Are there any? Can you give some more information about the grant values, and will there be will that affect the assessment if they ask for lower money versus?
No, so we expect to see a full range of projects, both in terms of value, but also duration. And it's about the assessment will be on what is that project being put forward the best way of realizing the goals that is set as part of the application. So you should ask for the money and duration that is necessary to take you to the next stage. I think is your advice on that. And in terms of project start, so yeah, we're anticipating project to start in September, and that is in order to incur some spend in this financial year. So and we can only apologize for that. But yes, the deadline will be short.
Any further questions?
Quite a few.
I think does the application need to involve subcontractors' details from the beginning? Is there any chance of including them during the project?
So each circuit.
So is it to specify subcontractors in the application stage? Is there
I think, I mean, I think in terms of the intention to submit, you don't need that now. We do not need that information now. We only need the information that's within the form. But actually, for your full application, yes, in order for the panel to assess it, we will need to know who you intend to subcontract to and what the work will be and how much it will cost.
Can I just pick up on some criticism, which is absolutely so, and which has been thumbed up 5 times, that we're missing the point on EDI. So I think what we're trying to do is mitigate this by publishing everything now. Okay, so I realise that there will be, you know, pressured timescales between the end of the intention to submit stage and the full applications. We're trying to mitigate that as best as we can by publishing all the information on the call now, even though we're only at pre-announcement stage. So we are trying our best to mitigate impacts on EDI. We would also, of course, encourage as full a diverse a range of applicants as possible as well. So again, perhaps people can pick up offline if they feel we really are missing the point in EDI and what else, you know, we might be able to do.
I mean, we'll be gathering the full application stage. We will be able to look at those characteristics and learn from this process. So if we do find that we are really finding that, you know, we're having an overwhelming bias, that would be something I think we would look to learn from and sort of introduce measures to correct.
Just to follow up on the resubmission point, what about the applicants who had previously applied for the IAA funding? Would that count as resubmission?
Not if it's internal IA funding within an organisation, that wouldn't be counted as a resubmission. So this is a resubmission to UKRI is what we were saying. We aren't looking for resubmissions to people who've applied to UKRI schemes, but unfortunately have not been successful at that application to UKRI. So if you applied within your research organisation and not received funding for the IA, internally, that would not count as a resubmission in this case.
Can I pick up on that? Other question?
Sorry, I thought you were saying. And can the funding be, I think it's a very specific question, they can come back to us, but could the funding be used to contract CRO to undertake some preclinical studies?
the same answer as before. Any subcontracting needs to be appropriately justified in the full application stage. In theory, yes. And same, there's a question about support for the TTO and funding for the TTO. In theory, the answer is yes, but of course that will need to be justified within the application about why that is appropriate. And obviously what we don't want to do is double fund funds, so TTOs. We don't want to be double funding TTOs, but of course we realise that that in theory that those costs can be applied for, but will be looked at by the panel.
What about previously funded UKRI projects? Are those eligible?
Yes. So we are saying that it doesn't matter where the original research has been, how it's been funded, okay, they are eligible for support. Obviously, what we're looking to do is advance that stage of commercialization. So if a project either had basic discovery research funding from UKRI, then absolutely yes. Likewise, if they've had basic discovery research funding from a charity or from industry or something, or European funding, they could apply. They could also apply if they've had previous follow-on or translational funding from UKRI, as long as this is to advance the stage of commercialization past what was done for within that grant.
Alex, would you like to say anything about IP, foreground IP or IP generated through this scheme?
Yeah, so as part of the proof of concept, the normal UKRI term and condition applies. And that details that the IP generating through those projects and those grants to the institution is owned by the institution that generates it. So I think that's make it clear. We use the normal term and condition of grants for that.
Thank you.
Just conscious of time, so maybe a couple more questions. I think we close up.
Last one.
I mean, I think
So,
go for it. Go for it.
One last question, I think.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I was just going to ask, will we be able to publish these FAQs somewhere?
So
Collated and answered.
yeah, I think it's a very pertinent point. We'll try to run them up and see if we can do that.
So exactly where I'm going to go. I was going to sort of say this. It's really interesting. Well, it's great that this has attracted so much interest. So many questions. There's a richness of questions in the Q&A and the chat. So I was going to ask the team in UKRI, what do you see happening next? In terms of one, you have the plans you've outlined this morning and you've responded to many of those questions. What are the next steps for you in terms of the process, but also picking up on some of those other questions that you might not have been able to get to or other people might follow up with afterwards?
So I think what we will try to do, will take us a few days to do. We've also got a small matter of the spending review happening at the moment. But we will aim to sort of group the questions and publish the response to everyone who's signed up to this webinar, is what I would say. I think, yeah, I can't give an exact timescale. It may be, up to a week or something like that. But we will certainly do that. And I think at least circulate it to the people who've signed up to this webinar. I think, can we say that? Is that fair?
Yeah. And if they have any questions, please reach out to commercialization@ukri.org.
Yes. So we've had lots of questions for the commercialization at UKRI website. If you haven't answered a question or you've got a further follow-on question, please come through to that mechanism. We'll pick it up in parallel. So
that's really helpful. Thank you for that. We will give you the access to all the data short from this. I think I want to ask you one final question, which is just to remind us of the headlines of what you wanted to say at the start about this scheme. We've had lots of detailed questions from multiple perspectives, but just to give you a chance just to sort of, in a minute or so, just summarize the headlines around the scheme and what you want it to achieve.
Thank you, Stuart. Yeah, so as I said, so what we realised that there is significant demand for pre-commercialization stage proof of concept and commercialization funding. That we know that from this, but also from the demand, but also things like the university spin-out review. So this is one mechanism by which we're hoping to move forward to closing that gap. We know that this scheme itself does not close that gap. Okay, so the funding is very welcome, but we also all know that 40 million over 5 years is not enough to close that gap in its own right. So this is one of the bit of jigsaw puzzles to help do that. What we're looking to do, really, to be honest, is ideally fund things that could not otherwise be funded through other UKRI or other funding schemes that are out there at the moment. So this is one part of an overall jigsaw puzzle. It's not meant to be, the answer to all commercialisation here. And what we want to do really is, the outcome for us is to fund a range of projects, or have funded a range of projects, okay, with the real exciting projects that hopefully unlock at that pre-commercialisation stage, the stage research where we know there's a gap. We know there's a gap in funding at universities and other research institutions at that pre-commercialisation stage. And the idea is hopefully to use this funding to help close the gap and lead to examples of successful commercialisation through various routes.
Thank you, Tony. That's really helpful. And I just need to say a few thank yous and a few little bits of information. So this webinar will be available on our website for those that you want to send details onto if you're viewing this. But also a thank you to the UKRI team for being so open to make themselves available to answer questions and get into the detail of how this scheme will work. But just to sort of build on Tony's comment, it's wonderful to see so much interest in this area of the need to fund and develop technologies. As Tony says, this is one way that collectively we need to respond to the spin out review, and I'm sure there will be other programs and other initiatives that follow on from that to try and apply funding into this space, ultimately to help ideas come from research and have an impact in society. So thank you again for making yourself available. Thank you again for everybody listening, and we will share the questions so that the team in UKRI can dwell on them and work out how best to sort of provide that information to everybody. Thank you all very much.
Thank you again for the great questions, everyone. We appreciate it. So
Thanks for having us. Yeah.